Chaos as a faction in Warhammer is horrifying to me. It captures this cosmic supernatural horror aesthetic that is mesmerizingly disturbing, for lack of a better word. But out of the four Chaos gods, those being Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, Slaanesh is the one that bothers me the most. For those who are unaware, Slaanesh is the Chaos god of excess, the personification of the seven deadly sins taken to its utmost extreme. In Warhammer Fantasy, Slaanesh just appeared alongside the three other Chaos gods, but in Warhammer 40,000, Slaanesh actually has a pretty fleshed out backstory. Slaanesh was born from the Eldar, or the Eldari, depending on who you ask, around the year 25,000, after millions of years of advancement and basically being top dog of the universe, decided to engage in more eccentric hobbies, where simple parties turned to raves, turned to much darker and scarier things than I can mention on YouTube. And because of this, and the fact that the Eldar are inherently very psychic, and the warp will reflect what those psychic beings do en masse, creating warp storms, making it incapable for humans or anyone else to travel around the galaxy, cutting people off and creating the Age of Strife for humanity, there was an extreme psychic backlash that resulted in the birthing of Slaanesh, making it so that anyone who wasn't in the Eldar webway basically got their souls consumed immediately. Those that survived now live on giant ships called craft worlds, trying to prevent their souls from being stolen by Slaanesh after they die, or engage in decadence to keep their souls intact while Slaanesh withers away at them. And as of the 42nd millennium, Slaanesh now lays claim to many a devotee within space, ranging from the noise marines of the Emperor's Children, all the way to the lowly priests engaging their base urges to an extreme degree, all the while gaining power from the souls of those who lose themselves to their ambitions and urges. Slaanesh has some similarities to other Chaos gods on a surface level, but the one that I feel like that is most close to is Khorne. But they differ in one major aspect. Take someone who really enjoys fighting in war. That person who enjoys fighting in war, but only for the sake of fighting, and will try to improve their skill, but only for the sake of the fight and nothing else, that person belongs to Khorne. You know, the skulls for the skull throne, blood for the blood god thing. But if that individual, say, was more obsessive, more emotional and ambitious, who had more passion behind them, that emotional drive that pushes someone into direct action is the defining characteristic of someone who would fall to the alluring nature of Slaanesh. Anyone from a lonely man wanting more out of his life to a legendary warrior set on the wrong path is eligible, because Slaanesh represents all of the positive and negative emotions like joy, love, hatred, and envy. It is very easy for someone to fall into the grasp of Slaanesh because of this, especially if that individual is prone to excessive pride. There is a reason why the Emperor's Children fell to Slaanesh so bad. Their lust for perfection in war and all things puts them directly into the line of sight for corruption by Slaanesh. To me, that's the thing that differentiates Slaanesh from the other Chaos gods. Because in order to gain favor from, say, Khorne, Nurgle, or Tzeentch, you have to prove yourself, you have to basically give up a bit of a bargaining chip to make it seem like they were worth your while. I mean, think about it. Angeron was looking for purpose and got hoodwinked by Lorgar and becoming a demon of Khorne. Magnus wanted to save his sons, and Mortarion got tricked by Typhus. You can walk into the realm of Slaanesh and be deemed worthy just by your zeal and energy alone. And that, to me, makes them easily the most dangerous Chaos god. And while Fulgrim was inadvertently hoodwinked by the Layer Blade, that doesn't change the fact that most of the Emperor's Children went over to Slaanesh willingly, Fulgrim included, despite the manipulation. They wanted more, and they would not stop until they got it. I mean, for God's sakes, Lucius betrayed Saul Tarvitz for nothing more than pure spite. That type of mindset perfectly typifies the attitude of Slaanesh's greatest champions. Whether it is Fulgrim, Lucius, or Sigvald, Slaanesh is an ever-encompassing force that pulls in the ambitious and driven, manipulating them into a wild obsession and making those who could have good intentions into nothing more than urge-driven monsters that are slaves to their own darkness. Slaanesh, to me, isn't just a chaos god that is the domain over whips and chains and rock and roll to the point where it's ridiculous. It's not just noise marines and Fabius Bile tinkering. Those who serve Slaanesh won't chop you up with a chain axe or annihilate you with a tank like the World Eaters or Iron Warriors. They're a waking nightmare, representing the worst pain and pleasure available to any living being. Being in the presence of anyone associated is the worst nightmare possible. Do not bother running, because they will be right behind you, toying with you like a cat does a mouse, laughing all the while, until they finally catch you and subject you to things that would make you wish you never existed. So with all that being said, I wish Slaanesh appeared more in 40k. I mean, sure, the Emperor's Children are a really cool faction, and we just got a book with Fabius Bile and Belisarius Cawl, which was quite good. But I don't see the ground-level threat that Slaanesh poses on average. And I know that we're gonna get the Emperor's Children relaunch soon, given that all the major Chaos-derived legions are now their own specific factions, instead of specific rule sets, say in the 3rd edition or 3.5 Chaos Space Marine codexes. But outside of tabletop, I want a more story-central presence. Not just short stories or something else. Something that would show up as either supporting antagonist or something that is alluded to. Because as someone who's a fan of films like Saw and Hellraiser, and especially Event Horizon, this is a unique type of horror that could be represented in 40k a lot more often. But I understand why Slaanesh is not depicted as often. Tzeentch is basically just magic. Khorne is violence, and Nurgle is disease and gross-out horror. Those, while still grotesque in many ways, are easier pills to swallow for, say, a parent whose child wants to get into Warhammer, and this kid picks up a book and you skim through, and then you see a page seeing what an average Slaanesh cult does on a Tuesday afternoon. That's not going to be a sell, and that parent is not going to allow their kids to get into the hobby, because all they're going to see is that and never let them touch it again. Slaanesh is not marketable. As cool as they are, it's not a very marketable entity, despite how fascinating it is to me. But there is a fair amount of potential. The concept of being, say, a guardsman sitting in a foxhole hearing the deafening sound of noise marines wailing and charging your position, or being captured by a Drukhari raiding party would be horrifying to see. I just wish we saw it more. Slaanesh, as a faction, has a lot of potential, and I just wished it was brought more into the forefront. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.